Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Besides the Revolution. Jack and I are back together to have a couple of conversations about a bunch of different things. So, hey Jack, good to see you. You had a great piece the other day that was on the Substack, and I wanted to kind of get into it because I think there's a lot of meat around it in terms of how we're looking at things and how we're seeing things in terms of the current administration. So good to see you. I'd love to have you break that down a little bit if you can.
Yeah, that piece is, I didn't really rate it that much, but I'm glad you liked it, and other people did too. It was just, I started writing the news one morning, and I just ended up going on this long, rambling sort of journey. I was like, oh, I might as well put this out as a single post, but oftentimes I find myself capable and ready to write stuff like that, but I don't really in my head think it's worth putting out unless I really spend hours on the research and all this stuff, which is why sometimes it can be hard for me to get a piece out, regularly. But I'm glad I did it because it was just what I was thinking at the time. And what it was is I see that every day when we do the news, you're really good at keeping up on the Kennedy stuff. And I noticed I've kind of slipped away from it. And it's not been a conscious decision that I've made because, as readers and viewers here may well know, I wrote that book during the campaign about Kennedy, and it was quite important to me. But, now I kind of feel as though, we got him in. We didn't win. I wanted him to win as a Democrat, honestly. I thought it would have been very healing for the nation, which was the argument I made in that book. And so we didn't really win, but at least he's in the White House. And, the right people are in the right place and doing the right thing, and I'm happy about it. And I was just talking about what happens when you kind of look outside your bubble. We all get wrapped up in the issues that we really care about and forget about everything else that's going on. And you feel like the things you write about are the most important, the most compelling, the most urgent things. And actually, there's a whole big world out there. There are a lot of policy areas that are equally important and should demand our attention. And so what I've seen in the last few months, having gone back into defense reporting, which is something I did for a while and then didn't for a couple of years, and now I'm back to it. And it's just quite remarkable where we are in terms of national security and defense. And, people don't realize what's going on out in the world. They don't realize that China is rapidly building these 5th generation and, working on 6th generation stealth aircrafts. They just flew through a strait near Japan, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, and an area that is very closely monitored by Japanese and South Korean and US military. And they flew this new plane straight through, allegedly, without any of us noticing. That's alarming. The Indo-Pacific region is becoming very tense right now. And China, Russia, they're rapidly developing their militaries. And that's why NATO is now scrambling to finally do what Trump's been saying for years, which is to raise your defense spending commitments. Frankly, just to secure your own existence, to protect yourself against what might come next. The war in Ukraine should be a sign to everyone in Europe that, you aren't necessarily safe. You can't just assume that you're going to be safe because we've lived in peacetime for so long. And so as I've been writing about this stuff, you realize just really how dangerous this world is. And the situation that we find ourselves in now it's far more extensive than just what's happening here at home. And what Kennedy is doing is really vitally important and long overdue. But at the same time, a lot of it won't matter if we end up going to war. And that's not out the realm of possibility. We've seen in recent days, Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, former president of Russia, telling Trump that he's taking a step toward war with Russia. And Trump responding to him by saying he should watch his words because he's entering a dangerous situation. Our world leaders are threatening war. That's what's happening. That's between the lines here. And sure, it gets reported, but I feel like nobody takes it seriously. And it's like, man, the things you realize when you just look up for a second outside of your bubble.
Yeah, two things that struck me out of this conversation. One is the amount, your conversation around war is really legitimate because I think it's always this kind of underlying threat. And for 70 years, the United States has pretty much provided this umbrella of security around, especially in Europe. And I think that's what's NATO's existence was truly for, was just a sort of, let's keep Europe from fighting with one another. Let's create a realm of peace. And that's been true to the expense and sort of to the the bad side of the ledger in terms of economics to the United States, I think. But now we're at this point where you're starting to see, I think, this rumbling amongst Europe of how do we take care of ourselves? The United States may not step up to this. And I think that's good, but I also think that puts things in a pretty tenuous spot, because if somebody's sort of been your sugar daddy for 70 years, it's pretty hard to suddenly stop that. And I think that's an interesting aspect of what you're seeing. I'd love you to speak on that, about the war related to that. But I think the other piece of that is that no one's reporting on the war, because this is like Trump's modus operandi, right? He just sort of moves into these spaces of bluster and fight, and then nothing really comes of it. So I think people are getting used to this sort of negotiation by, art of the deal stuff. And I think that's dangerous. I think there's a lot to that there should be a much larger advocacy for a place of peace. I think world leaders need to be doing that more than this blustering. I don't think Ukraine is going to win this war. That's my opinion of it. I think most people around the globe see that. I don't think and I think that's done something really detrimental to the United States, in that we've fought this as a proxy war, which was a foolish thing to do, but that's what we've chosen to do. And now we've sort of shown our cards that we can't beat a superpower, a former superpower like Russia. What does that say to China? And I think that puts us in a really precarious spot related to Taiwan and a bunch of other things around the globe. So I know you've been doing a lot more for defense stuff, so I'd love you to speak to those things. Am I wrong about that?
No. And what I would say about Trump is I think people are starting to realize that, sure, Trump is a great negotiator, tough negotiator. But just because he's good doesn't mean he's guaranteed to win all the time. And so I think had Trump won that second election and just gone straight into a second term, the Ukraine invasion probably wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But it did. And so Trump can talk all day about how it wouldn't have happened under his leadership. But that doesn't mean necessarily that he's capable of stopping it once it already has happened. Ultimately, Putin knows he can't lose this war. And he won't stop. They've lost over 1 million people to casualty and death so far. So he's quite willing to lose people. Its economy has suffered massively. It's spending more than 30% or something of its federal budget on defense now. It's about to be slapped with new sanctions because Putin and the Kremlin generally have not really responded to Trump's deadline at all. It, quote unquote, hasn't phased him, they've been saying. And I don't think it has. I don't think Trump can easily stop this. Now, what's interesting, by the way, another point I wanted to make on that, I'm trying to remember your two questions here. I did write some notes down, but on the fact that Europe has long been, reliant on its sugar daddy, the United States, I will say I don't think there's any real sign that Trump will withdraw from NATO. That's part of his negotiating strategy, and has been telling them that he will unless they step up. And, there's been a lot of cheering for Trump, saying, oh, Trump finally made them do it. I don't think Trump made them do it. I think the world changed in the last 4 to 8 years, and NATO's realized they have a problem, because what they've announced is they're going to be raising defense spending to 5% of GDP among NATO members. So that's the goal. But the way they've managed to do that is to say, well, 1.5% of that could actually be infrastructure that is beneficial for national defense purposes. And I forget which country this was. It was obviously one of the European states. But part of the infrastructure expenditure will be strengthening bridges and roads to ensure that tanks and other heavy machinery can be moved along through these civilian areas without causing damage to civilian infrastructure. That should tell you that we're under threat. This isn't just we need to buy more bombs, we need more artillery, we need more planes. That's not what's happening. They're strengthening domestic infrastructure in preparation or anticipation of future conflict. So it's quite scary. I don't think the US is going to be pulling out anytime soon. It's just it's far too important, frankly, at this stage with tensions with China, tensions with Russia, the BRICS in general, this growing sort of Eastern allied bloc of nations. We are very much divided and separate from those guys. And interestingly, Trump is kind of maybe making it worse. What he's just done with India, slapping 25% tariffs, or promising to, and saying, we basically do no business with them anyway, so let them have it. I mean, in principle, I get what he's saying. I do get it. But at the same time, you're just pushing India into the arms of Russia. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about India being this great new partner so that we could move away from China and start relying on them instead. Well, now we're moving away from China, which is great, but we're not ready to do it because there's so much infrastructure, manufacturing, and so on that needs to be established in the United States before we can become self-dependent. China has incredible manufacturing infrastructure. Even if you wanted to build, say, an iPhone in the United States, you simply cannot do it because we're nowhere close to what China has. And now we're pushing India away too. And it really makes you wonder, people say Trump 4D chess. Well, are we prepared for this? Are we prepared to be, raising our expenditure on defense and military, which is now necessary, to levels that, you might expect from a country like Russia that is somewhat isolated in a sense, and China, which is, trying to become a military power. We're doing something that nations that are fundamentally different to us are doing, and at the same time isolating ourselves too. And again, not ideologically or, in principle opposed to this stuff, but I do wonder if Trump is trying to do too much too quickly and isolating potential allies in the process. So it's.
Well, I mean, the manufacturing side of America has been hollowed out for 30 years. I don't think you can redo that in an afternoon.
No.
Beyond that, the world has changed. In the American landscape has changed in terms of bureaucracy. So what you could maybe have jump-started 30 years ago, it will now take you 5 to 10 years to get through even just the political process from a land planning standpoint, a development standpoint. It'll take you so long to get this thing started. His term will be over. His successor's term will be over, most likely. We just live in I wrote a piece last night that I'm kind of still working on. It's kind of broken and bland, which is kind of what the United States has become. And it's all because of these things. We've spent $37 trillion. We have very little to show for it. We have a war we can't win via a proxy war, which I never think we should have been in, but we are. We still can't win it. We can't do much with it. We're alienating all of our manufacturing sector around the world from a global perspective, which again, like you say, philosophically, I'm in favor of. But if you turn that back and say, well, let's do it in the United States, where are you going to do that? Are you going to go back to Maine and re-up their old factories that have gone out in the textile world? Are you going to come back to California and rejuvenate things? The political process they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They've got way too many codes. Growth is unallowable in most of these places that people want to be. It's bureaucratically so suckered down that there's no way that you can actually do anything interesting. So we're just in a very precarious moment. I've said it for a long time, but I think the end of the empire is near, and I don't know who's the successor. It was a very natural succession after Suez for the British Empire to hand the keys to a young teenage America, but I don't see one that will replace it in the same fashion with the same objectives of individual liberty that we have seen from this succession of the British Empire to the United States. I don't see that happening, so it's a pretty tenuous time.
I mean, it might simply be impossible. Again, we've talked before about this illusion of permanence, and I kind of alluded to it earlier too when I was saying just we've lived in peacetime for so long doesn't mean we will remain in peacetime. I like to remind people that, over in Europe, we still have the scars of war from not that long ago. My grandfather's house was blown up during the Second World War. Ukraine is at war right now. You can go and walk the streets of Warsaw in Poland and see bullet holes in the wall. Wasn't that long ago. And so I feel people have kind of become complacent. And now this also works with this idea of what you're saying is, can we reinvent the United States in a sense, for the future, but maintaining these, original intended goals of what this country and this family of people should be. And given that we're entering this new era of artificial intelligence, I don't know how possible that is, because this technology, political circumstances, geopolitical and defense circumstances, I think all of these things combined now mean that our social contract is going to be completely torn up. Life will be fundamentally different. We already see this in the way people do business in the United States. You've probably seen those posters and billboards that have gone back up in, I believe, New York City, saying, the era of hiring humans is over, or the era of AI employees is here, something like that. And isn't that just completely antithetical, in my mind at least it is, to the American dream? Because the American dream wasn't always about, I'm going to build this business for myself. A business requires employees. It requires a team. And in building a business, and I've done this myself, you bring people on board, create a great team, and those people enjoy, the fruits of their labor, the American dream too. Not everyone in the country can possibly be a business owner. But with AI, we're entering this sort of time where people seem to think the economy can work that way. Everyone has to grind. Everyone has to build, they say. Well, not everyone's capable of building. Not everyone wants to build. Some people are better suited to help you build. And the economy cannot simply work if you just say, well, don't hire employees, build for yourself, and everyone can do it themselves. How does that work? It doesn't.
No, and I think, my children are totally exasperated by the entire American landscape. I mean, when I talk to them about what they have hopes for with the future, what do they think the future looks like, they're very pessimistic. And, some of that is youth for sure, and some of that is part of it. But they're empirically up against what are statistically bad things for them. The housing pricing is off the charts. The wages are terribly down. You've got the threat of AI. My middle son the other night was like, Dad, what is the point? And I can't really defend it. I don't have a great answer for it other than, I think life is worth living. And I think there are things within relationships and creating and sort of a restoration of beauty that are really important. But I can't answer that question to him about how that interfaces with an American experiment that is faltering. There was a great discussion the other day that I heard that I really resonated with, which was, if all of these smarty pants people, which is kind of how we've lived for the last 70 years, academia, government, whatever else, all the smartest people, economists, all of them have told us that this is how this is supposed to work. And here we sit on the verge of something that's really unforeseeably bad. Why aren't they all out on their ears, frankly? Why? I mean, I don't understand it. I don't get it. And so I really resonate with my children's frustration. I understand it. I can totally see why they're frustrated. I think, I think it's one of the things that we were, as Kennedy people, I think we were really hopeful that some of these things could be addressed from a systemic place, that you would look at it and say, these are the things that are wrong. You guys have been wrong about taxes. You've been wrong about growth. You've been wrong about the Federal Reserve. You've been wrong about health. You've been wrong about war. And you need to go, all of you. And I think that independent sort of vein that he was in seems to be maybe the only way to sort of restore some of these things, because it isn't going to happen with the parties. So I'd be curious, as we kind of out of that conversation, what's your assessment, 6 months into this? Are we any better? Are we fixing anything? Is the administration making progress? What's your take on all of that?
Well, from what I can see, Kennedy's just doing a very good job of plowing ahead with the things that he said he would do without much fuss or much drama, if I'm honest with you.
Right.
And a really important part of what's being done in this administration, I think, is messaging. And that gets lost among Republicans a lot, because many Republicans are in this sort of fight mode. They think, now we're on the offensive. We have to completely and utterly destroy these people who try to completely and utterly destroy us. And I can see why they're saying that. I get it. But at the same time, you've got to remember that a lot of Americans are not really as heavily involved in the culture war stuff. You can say that you may not take an interest in politics, but politics takes an interest in you, and that's true. But it doesn't change the fact that a huge number of Americans are not so heavily invested in politics that they've frankly seen all of the injustice or understand all the injustices that have taken place. And so when you come into the White House as a wrecking ball, aggressive, uncompromising, it doesn't really matter if you think you're right or if you even are right. The messaging matters because everything you do now can be undone. And, someone can win in 4 more years and completely undo all of that. The only way to make things last is to win over the people. You must have a compelling argument. And I think that's where Trump, shoots himself in the foot a lot, is because I understand how he operates. It's intuition. I think Trump is all about intuition. And he's said that before. And, if you have good intuition, then great. But you have to communicate that to the people. And what I'm seeing from Kennedy, it looks like he's getting thimerosal removed from the flu vaccines, which is something he's campaigned against for years. And if that means that vaccines can still be developed and used just without mercury being injected into your body, wonderful. Who can disagree with that? And I think also Kennedy's aided by the fact that he is not what the media has long accused him of being. He's not anti-vax. He's not a conspiracy theorist. Everything he's doing is, evidence-led and actually quite agreeable. People support it. And so the fact that he's not come in and said, listen, we're getting rid of all the vaccines, everything's going to be stopped. He says, no, we're going to just keep things moving as they are, make changes as we go based on evidence, and we'll see where we end up. And I think that's working. And it's made a lot of people I've seen in the sort of original Kennedy world mad. I've seen a lot of people who are very supportive of Kennedy now attacking him for not doing enough. But I think he's moving at just the right pace. I think he's doing the right thing. Because otherwise, he would just end up doing what Trump is doing, which is plowing ahead with the most radical ideas because, he's only got a few more years left. Look what happened. Trump's popularity went up for a bit, but it's now plummeting again, even among young people who are leaning more right, interestingly. So, I'm quite impressed so far by how Kennedy's handled things. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the it's never good enough crowd will always be there. I think it's just part of American politics. I think, I think everybody had this grand hope. We're all very good at projection, right? So we project our hopes and our own thoughts about how we would run the government upon these people. And I don't think we have any understanding of how deep and tangled this mess is. So to make any accomplishment when you actually have saboteurs in your midst, which he did, and he does. I mean, I think he still remains. There are people that just do not like him who still have held on to their jobs within the bureaucracy. So to accomplish anything in that way with those kind of odds against you, I'm in support of it. I think that's better than most could say of the other cabinet members that are out there. You have the best thing we've gotten out of the Homeland Security is that we can keep our shoes on, which was an irrational stupidity in the first place. So you sort of have TSA Barbie. Well, I am happy about it, but they've replaced it with eye scanners.
Yeah.
So I just don't. There's some things there that I think. At the end of the day, you've got a lot of stuff that Kennedy's going sort of line by line. I've described this to a number of people this way, that his work is line by line. My fear with him is he'll run out of time in some of these things that are really important and critical, but I think he's got his own agenda in terms of what his timeline is. I think he knows where he's headed and what he wants to do with it. So I'm impressed with him. The most impressive directors or secretaries at this point are both Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy, who were both Democrats, independently minded Democrats who have made their best moves, I think, for the administration. I don't know that the other Fox News stars have done as much. So I think it's good that those two people see their role in government as one that they take seriously. Tulsi's been excellent. I think the stuff that she's just kind of breaking apart with this Russiagate stuff is superb. the way she's doing it, the way she's handling it. And I think Kennedy's been fantastic on a number of fronts. So I think it's been very good. You said something there that I think I wanted to pick at a little bit, which was the youth sort of moving to the right. That is a phenomenon that some of you experienced years ago in England because of not being listened to. And I think that my children's sentiment is around that they are not being listened to by the people that they thought that were listening to them, the Democrats, more liberal-minded people. What do you see, and break that down a little bit further? I think that's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, a poll came out. People may well have seen it because it quickly went viral on Twitter. And it's a survey by Pew Research showing swings by age group and gender from Democrat to Republican between 2023 and 2025. And it found that men aged 18 to 29 are now Republican plus 44. And that's the swing, I understand, not, the actual figure. That's, 44% swing. And women 18 to 29, Republican plus 14. So things are moving towards the right. And we kind of saw this a little in the UK, and I think maybe we're seeing it now too. What I saw in the 2000s was nothing like this. This was just, working class white boys mostly, who were, swayed towards the far right because of everything from immigration to grooming gangs, as we've talked a million times before about. But now what we're seeing is these problems have been, I started talking about grooming gangs 17 years ago, and it's only now really becoming, and I wasn't the first, by the way, I'm just making a point. It's 17 years. It's been a long time, much longer for others. And, when those issues go unaddressed for another 20 years after they were already a problem, did they think it was going to get better? No. I wrote another piece. It might have been the piece that you referenced. I can't remember, but I wrote recently that really what this has done is exposed a class issue in the UK. And I'm kind of verging away from what we were talking about there, but I think this is an important point. So what I saw when I was young is cultural tensions, a lack of social cohesion, active sort of hostility between communities, grooming gangs that were being ignored and dismissed by politicians, and large-scale immigration that largely impacted white working-class towns. But it's gone beyond that now. And it's not just affecting the working class anymore. Because back then, you could easily dismiss people who made these arguments and expressed these concerns by saying, oh, it's a working class yobbo, it's just some criminal and someone who wants to incite violence, which is just amazing that that's the first thing they jump to when they see working class people angry. Unbelievable. But now it's leaking out into the middle class sort of world in the UK. And middle class in the UK is not quite the same as over here, because we don't really have that kind of middle class that you guys have. You're either like working class or poor, or you're quite comfortable. And the quite comfortable people are the middle class people. And those middle class people are now seeing these problems on the streets. They're seeing, illegal aliens and migrants who happen to be law-breaking types, or perhaps mentally unwell and in need of treatment, somehow ended up on our shores and are now our problem, wreaking havoc on the streets. And people are suddenly going, where did this come from? Like, what happened? And, there's groups of people who are now standing outside of Westminster, middle-class people saying, we're not racist, we're not far right, we're concerned about our communities. This is happening in actually to a friend of mine who lives in Canary Wharf, or near Canary Wharf in London, where they have this huge migrant hotel, and it's just causing chaos on the streets. People's kids aren't safe. And these middle-class people are out there saying, we're not far right, but I don't want my kid to get attacked by these random guys on the street. And it's happening. And it's funny because that's what we said. That's what we said the whole time. The only difference is it's middle-class people who are now saying it. So the fact that this problem or these problems are now more visible means more people are moving towards the right. And so I think young people in general in the UK are moving towards the right too. But what concerns me about this, and, we've talked about this just privately earlier, is I can't help but wonder how different the world might be, or how different Western Europe and the United States might be, had liberals or progressives, Democrat types, traditional leftists actually just listened to us to begin with. Because now what we're seeing, I don't see this swing of 44 points of men aged 18 to 29 towards Republicans necessarily as a good thing. Because I don't think they're swinging towards the Republican Party at a time when the Republican Party is actually offering something conducive to, how would I word this? Something that's conducive to people getting along. Because as I said earlier, I feel like the Republican Party is still in this war mindset. And they just want to win. And they're not going to win long term unless they think about messaging. And we now have this problem where you have the likes of Candace Owens and Andrew Tate and all these dreadful people and a bunch of anti-Semites who are peddling all sorts of nonsense about what's actually happening in Israel, becoming mainstreamed on the right. And it's like, well, great. Young people are finally swinging away from the radical progressive left and into the arms of nutters. And that's not to say that the Republican Party in general are nutters. That's absolutely not true. It's not to say most of the Trump administration are nutters. I don't think that's true either. There's some exceptionally capable and talented and wonderful people in there. But at the same time, we do have this really loud fringe that concerns me. And I don't see it ending well. I just do not see it ending well, Aaron.
No, and my X feed has gotten progressively worse in relationship to the conversation around Israel. And I don't like this conversation at all. I've said it a number of times. I don't fundamentally understand it. I've tried to do my best to understand the story and what's happening there. I've tried to give as much benefit of the doubt to the conversation as I can. But, it's almost every conversation now steers its way into this space. I said it to you earlier. I don't think the Israeli government has done themselves any favor in terms of the PR association. They kind of have had a long run in the United States of sort of being untouchable by both parties to some degree. That has changed so significantly in the last year. And I don't know that that's just the influence of X or something like that. I think there are a number of things that just have not gone. They just haven't communicated well. And I think there's a void of communication that people then they can fill with their own choices. That's, I think, very much what has happened with some of the more radical people that have been discussing. If the government doesn't stand up and say, no, that's not what's happening, and here's why it's not happening, then people will project whatever they choose to into that space. That is just like 101 basic humanity stuff. Like if no one's disclosing, then you disclose your own facts. That's just the normal thing. So,
and it's really hard to fight against misinformation. I hate using the word misinformation.
I know,
wrongly it's been used, incorrectly for so long. But misinformation is real, and there's plenty of it in the media. And I reported on this the other day about 2 human rights organizations in Israel that are now accusing Israel of genocide, and the media went nuts. Israeli is accusing their own government of genocide. If you look into their arguments, it all just falls apart. And it's politically motivated too. Let's not forget that people with different opinions in Israel, they don't all agree. It doesn't mean that there's this mass awakening against Israeli policy in Gaza or the approach towards Palestine in general. But, just look into the facts. Whenever you see this stuff in the media, just read it yourself. And you'll see that these 2 organizations are claiming that Israel is like preventing aid from entering Gaza. And well, they're not claiming it, they're implying it, thinking people are stupid enough not to notice. But if you actually go and do the digging, you'll see, like, just one example that I gave the other day was in December 2024, UNRWA, the United Nations aid agency, said that aid packages could not be delivered through Gaza because the routes were too dangerous, that they had been sieged by terrorists and armed gangs within Gaza. The bottlenecks are not at the border. Israel's letting the aid in. And sure, you can have, criticism about maybe the conflict's gone on for too long. But at the end of the day, one has to ask, what is Israel meant to do? And I say this as someone who's generally very anti-war. So when I see what's happening, I don't love it. I don't like it. But I also don't have an answer for it. Someone on my Twitter feed earlier, I saw one of these Republican types sharing something on Twitter, on X. And they said, it's amazing that Trump would prevent us from doing trade deals with our neighbors, Canada, because they don't support the correct desert tribe 6,000 miles away or whatever it is. And I can't help but think how readily conservatives will describe Israel, the home of Christendom, the spiritual home of our civilization, is a desert tribe, a meaningless desert tribe thousands of miles away. It's the home of Jesus Christ. It's the birthplace of our civilization. And the people they're fighting, you really think that they're going to do a good job of maintaining this place? No, they're going to destroy the bloody lot of it. The moment Israel puts down their arms and says, okay, no more fighting, I mean, they would be destroyed overnight if Hamas had the weapons they wanted. It's just remarkable the situation we find ourselves in. And, I will say, I've been a little worried. I hope I'm not going to piss off some of our viewers here. But then again, if I do, then we're not on the same page anyway. But I've seen people from within the Kennedy campaign, names that I remember from the early days of the Kennedy campaign, posting in group chats and on Twitter feeds and so on, like some either naive or anti-Semitic stuff that makes me queasy. But also, I don't understand, because Kennedy, from the beginning, has been very pro-Israel, very pro-Jew. And it's remarkable how people found their way into his world and then expected him to agree with them. This guy, like, the first time I saw Kennedy was with Shmuley Boteach. I love that name, by the way, Shmuley. Fantastic name. You thought that guy was going to be anti-Israel? Really? I don't understand it.
Yeah, for sure. And, like I said, I don't enjoy the conversation, because I think you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, which is that's always really frustrating. I'm with you. I don't know that there's a very elegant solution to any of it. War sucks. I mean, it just is the worst kind of thing. And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets, the harder and harder it is to unwind the animosity. And we're now 2 years plus, almost 2 years into this. And it's just, it's just really, really not a good situation or a good scenario for anybody. And I think that the hardest part about it is that, there is a lot of conflation that happens. And I think that's one thing that I will say, just sort of people who have this diehard defense of all things Israel do on the wrong side, which is that they conflate sort of this biblical Christianity and biblical worldview about Israel with the government of Israel. And I think I think we should do a better job of that. I think we should do a better job of making sure that, people are understanding that governments can be criticized no matter who they are. I think that's an important aspect of things, and their actions can be criticized, especially when it comes time to being at war. But I think the other piece of it is that you can't get into this and just say that everything is sort of blanketed and with one side or the other of this. This is a complicated deal. It's been going on a long time. There's not a very good solution to it. It's been long in excess of before even the state of Israel was formed. This has been something going on for a long time. It's been a part of our world that's very troublesome. So I don't have great answers to it, but I do resonate with you that this kind of push and move into spaces that become blanket statements about, all things Israel are bad or all Jews are bad. I mean, that's just it's just lazy, frankly. It's a very lazy intellectual exercise. I've said this a number of times in different pieces I've been writing lately. This whole world of media misinformation and kind of confusion and all the thousands and thousands of voices now that are contributing to this broadcast world, it becomes really imperative that the citizen become more citizen-ish. They have to do a very good job of breaking things down, reading, researching, understanding. We have trained our people for the last 70 years that the laziest answer is the best one. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I think that's where we are with Israel. I think that's a huge part of it, is that the laziest answer is the one we should jump in on. I don't think that's a very good choice. And I think it's one that, you can see atrocity everywhere. And I think you can pick sides easily in this, especially when you see atrocity. But I think I think that can be pretty lazy. I don't think that's the very best way through it. So.
No, and it feels like we're stuck in this sort of algorithmic feedback loop.
Yep.
It never used to be that all your news came from an algorithm. Sure, you choose which newspaper you read, but the newspapers were. I don't feel as though the media has ever been more partisan than it is now. And I think it's becoming a little less partisan as the world is sort of changing a little, but for the most part, it's still generally more partisan than it used to be. And with most people getting their news on social media now, people get their news on X, and that's fine. If you want to see like a breaking news story and so on, and sometimes you get some good deep dives. For a lot of for the most part, it's just people trying to monetize their content. So I don't really use X for that reason. I don't need to read how you've rewritten a news article written by someone like me already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for the most part, people get the news from these social media platforms and therefore from an algorithm. And when you're wrapped up in your own world, not particularly interested in what the other side has to say, which is, I don't understand that because I've always been very interested in what those who oppose me say. And I've actually found myself changing my mind quite a lot over the years, but a lot of people don't. And it becomes this sort of tribal matter. The news has made us tribal, or I should say, the algorithms has made us tribal. And so it doesn't really matter, frankly, what Israel says, because I was about to say, if I were, part of the Israeli government or an advisor, I would suggest a really, really good PR campaign. When I say a PR campaign too, I don't mean like catchy advertising and, trying to, highlight the best things you've done and so on. I just mean that give people the facts in a really understandable way and say, listen, we understand that this is what the media is saying. Here are the facts. Do with that what you will. It would be helpful. But at the same time, like I say, with this algorithmic world and lens through which people see the world, I don't think it really matters. The truth can bite them on the arse, and people won't even notice. So, I mean, what can Israel do? What can it do? What can it do in terms of the war? What can it do in terms of messaging? God knows at this point. And that's why I'm so doom and gloom in terms of national security and defense spending. Is it really does feel like we are hurtling towards World War III.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that has to change if Western civilization is to survive, is this sense that you have to tell the truth about things. We have lived in this sort of intelligence agency world in which everything is clandestine and everything is a secret. We can't have the facts. You saw it in COVID. You saw it in 9/11. You saw it in the war in Iraq. You've seen it now with Israel. You've seen it in Ukraine. You cannot get a broad spectrum of facts in order to sort of understand the thing that is happening. And the government, who should be a participant in telling you the truth about things, short of like, we're going to do the D-Day attack kind of thing, you don't know the information that's happening. And so the projection is just rampant in what people are doing with how they see the things. That piece, if we are to survive, it's going to have to come with that. That's where the media has failed. If there's been a failure in this deal, is that the fourth branch of government, which is supposed to be in some sense the press, has been replaced by an administrative state that is driven by an intelligence agency, and the press has been co-opted into that and bought into it, and they're as equal a participant in that as anybody. And so at the end of the day, you have no information coming, and you have no check against what the intelligence agencies are saying. And so everything is clandestine. So then everybody has to have a projection upon it. It's a very precarious place for a nation or a civilization or an amalgamation of Western civilization to be.
And I do wonder whether the Trump administration has even stopped to think about the implications of big tech, because what I'm seeing is I feel like Trump is just happy that big tech is now on his side.
Yeah,
and so
I agree.
Gone are the arguments about big tech. And now it's, well, they like us now, so maybe we can use it for our own purposes. And then you end up with shady businesses and organizations in the tech space who are closely working with the Trump administration.
Yep.
This is a whole extra episode to even talk about, but this idea of leveraging AI to allow government databases to communicate. You're literally just creating. I don't care what you say and the justifications and efficiency. I think it's worthwhile maybe doing things the old way, if less efficient, more expensive, if it means not having an AI-powered Big Brother, because I don't like the thought of that. And I find it quite remarkable that so few on the right are even talking about this, because had Kamala Harris won and onboarded, I don't know, Meta AI or something to do what
we'd have everybody be up in arms, right?
Right. And they would have the same arguments. Oh, we're making things more efficient. We're bringing things into the future. And, we've got to embrace technology and move with the times and get rid of the underground cave that contains, what are they called? Filing cabinets. I can't believe
filing cabinets. Yes,
filing cabinet. Keep the filing cabinets if it means we don't have an AI Big Brother superpower watching over everything that we do. I'd rather that.
I'm totally with you. It is another episode, because I think that is a mess, and I think that whole thing is it only contributes to what I was just saying about people feeling like they can project whatever they can upon that space, because you watch it and eventually, fool me once. What's the phrase? I don't know. Fool me once, fool me twice. It's shame on me. Whatever it is, I so suck at phrases. I can't even tell you.
Listen, it's better to admit you can't do it right than to try and do it wrong.
Whatever that phrase is, that's really kind of, that's why people get skittish. They say, well, I don't trust any of you, because look at what you've done to me in the past. It's not right. And I think that's where we're at with so much of this stuff. So then layer AI on top of it, layer on these databases, layer on government surveillance, and you just go, where do I go sign up to live in the woods where nobody knows where I am?
That's where I am now. I find myself moving backwards with technology. I used to be such a technology lover. I really did when I was young, in like the 2000s, early 2010s. But now I've got to the point where I don't know how to use maybe 50% of the features on my car. I'm not interested in it. I don't want my car to drive me. I'm growing frustrated with streaming services. And so I'm back with this guy. I don't know if you can see him.
Nice.
And so I'm slowly rebuilding my old CD collection. I am sick to death of big screen phones so I'm back to one of these.
A BlackBerry. I love it.
I'm past it. I don't care. I don't want the social media. I find myself getting stuck in loops watching these stupid bloody reels on Instagram. I'll go on Instagram to see what my family and friends back home are up to, and then all of a sudden I'm swiping. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like, it's crazy. So I'm trying.
An hour is gone. Yeah, no, it's true. I'm actually I've commissioned somebody to build an 1971 International Scout for me, because I don't want any of the stuff in it. It's like an old kind of Jeep looking thing. I don't for a new car. I don't want to. My car's got 150,000 miles on it. I drive cars like crazy for my job, and I'm just like, you know what? I just want to crank window, and I don't want to touch a bunch of buttons and all these things. I want to like move the air conditioner over in a lever, and I'm just done with the whole thing. And that's like, I think it's speaking to all these things that are happening to us, where we're just so overwhelmed by so many things. I'll leave it at this. I don't think we were designed as humans to know everything that's happening in all the places around the world, and our politics, our media, and our sort of actions towards those things are the result of a hypertension group of people who know too much.
Aaron, I can't even expand upon that, because I think you're absolutely right. We were not built for this, and I think it's making humanity worse.
Not at all. Well, good to see you, Jack. It's great to catch up, and we're getting better at doing this a little more consistently. So thanks for your time.
Now, which is great. And actually, I'm seeing, I think it's your articles that have been going out on that other Substack, which is really wonderful. But we've got more people coming in all the time, which is great. And sometimes I think, oh God, we need to do a better job of. We mentioned this before, a better job of advertising this on social media and X and everything. And, every time I try to make a clip on this software, it takes forever. I just can't do it. I'm not really a techie guy. But that being said, it seems like Substack is just such a great place for just, internal growth. Like it seems to be growing already. So let's just keep at it. And, I'm just so grateful to anyone who's coming along on this journey with us. And, the more that come on board and the longer that we do this, the more time we're going to be able to spend doing it. And I'm really looking forward to that. So it's just slowly, we're going to get there. And let's just keep in touch and keep doing these chats. I really enjoy them. And maybe one day we'll have 1 million viewers. Let's see.
What did you say the other day in our projections? We only have 58 months to go at our pace.
Yeah. I was like, if we have like 58 more months, if we grow at this pace, we might be able to actually make it a job. So, yeah.
Well, I like it, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope people are doing. I do want to say thanks to people that are subscribing. It's been really cool to have the people coming over from Jessica's site on House and Habit to listen to what we have to say and what I'm writing about over there. It's been great, very gracious of her to extend her giant platform to my voice in that, and I just couldn't be more thankful. I, sort of owe all of that to her willingness to share her audience with us. So, until next time, Jack, thanks so much for spending time, and we'll see you down the road.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.